My butcher had a Black Friday special. He did have a very lovely ribeye on the bone, which I couldn't resist. So I went, no, do you know
Oh,
what? You got me with your Black Friday special. This week in e-commerce, episode 115. Can you believe we are so far into the recordings? It's crazy. Alex, how are you?
can't believe it. But I am well, Mal. How are you?
I'm doing great. Look, I got to say, Black Friday is just flying by, or Cyber Month, whatever you want to call it. It's flying by. We are now into the crunch time. So this is a Cyber Week official. And I'm looking forward to seeing who else who hasn't done a sale yet is going to be launching theirs, because I think there's still quite a few holdouts from what I can tell.
Yeah, and to see how that kind of second stage or third stage for some brands we're going to see go live this week. Definitely feels like we're in the eye of the storm right now.
So everything feels a little bit calm where we are. So it actually feels very calm for me still, so which is weird. All across the board, though, numbers seem pretty good. No one's on fire. No one's having to dig even deeper for further discounts. It's all, from my perspective, going pretty well. So I'm looking forward to seeing what the numbers look like, the ABS numbers, to see what consumer spending, whether it did increase the 6% it was predicting to.
Yeah, me too. And just over the weekend, did a bit of shopping, true kind of brick and mortar, went to like the Homemakers Centre and everything. As absolute packed, like couldn't get a car park, which is always a good sign.
Yeah, I went to my butcher, and my butcher had a Black Friday special. They had a cabinet at the front. It was just like Black Friday special. I'm going, okay, now this is jump the shark. Although he did have a very lovely ribeye on the bone, which I couldn't resist. The price was just too good. So I went, no, do you know what? You got me with your Black Friday special.
And because of that, he's probably going to do it next year.
Yeah, probably. Look, a good piece of meat, any good produce always gets me, because I love my food. I love cooking. So if you put quality ingredients in front of me, I will spend money on.
Yeah. Well, and look, particularly perishables, like they have to go sometime. So, yeah, why not make the most of that?
Yep, absolutely. All right, we're going to get stuck into the episode. We've got a lot on marketplaces this week, so we're going to dive into that a little bit later on. But our first topic we're going to cover off is Princess Polly opening their very first Australian store. So they're opening this at Westfield Bondi Junction, which is a great Westfield. I used to live just around the corner from there, actually, and it's going to be quite the store. So there's going to be LED screens, big flashy dressing room mirrors, interactive mirrors, I should say, and also a promise to be dropping 50 new styles weekly. And this is just that further shift from the pure play darlings to being more omnichannel.
Yeah. I was excited to see this one. They actually, it opened on Saturday, I believe, the 22nd. So, what a date for them to open up a new store. A lot going on in the business. Seems like a great location. And yeah, to your point, we're just seeing more of that D2C open up stores and rather than being just online.
Yeah, I'm expecting a lot more brands to open up next year. I know of at least 3 brands who are opening up new retail stores, their first retail stores, I should say, in the first half of next year. So it's going to be super exciting as we move more into that. I'm really curious to see what that does to their numbers. There was, again, that hesitation from a lot of people at the start that it would cannibalize, but the data doesn't actually show that. Every time I've seen a store, a pure play brand open a retail store, they actually grow as a result of it. So I'm keen to see that trend continue, and seeing more new retailers as well in stores rather than the same boring assortment you see every year, every time.
Exactly. Yeah. It's just some fresh faces in the malls, which is great.
Yep. And speaking of a brand which is no longer a fresh race and won't be with us for very long, is OzSale, with the announcement last week that OzSale are going to be shutting down in January 2026. Now, OzSale have been around for a long time. I dare say they've probably been around for almost 20 years, or over 10 years, I would say. And they were ones who originally pioneered the whole flash sale, when you could get this brand X percentage off. But it seems that era is quietly dying.
Yeah. And I believe this affects the NZ sale as well. So both OzSale and NZ sale, both closing down, but at different times. I actually think NZ sale might have already closed down or is closer to closing than OzSale.
Yeah, and look, I think for customers, your unused credit will expire, but it kind of just shows, again, just like the difficulty to stand up a marketplace, because that's essentially what OzSale became, where they had that original flash sale model where they would get stock from a particular brand, they would sell it at, a massive discount. I've bought from OzSale a couple of times, going back 10 plus years ago. but now they're just a traditional marketplace. You go on there, they've got 20, 30, 40, 50 different brands and a fairly large range of old season stock, which you can buy at a pretty significant discount. But it's not really that different to anything else.
Yeah. And we've had lots of conversations around Amazon Prime. It feels like that's just absorbing this type of model, right?
Yeah, I think this year alone, we've had OzSale, we've had MySale, My Deal, I mean. So a number of them are closing down because how do you stand up against that sort of model? And we're going to dive into this one a little bit more, a little bit later in the show as well.
Yeah, for sure.
But it just shows that, the importance of having really good margins, particularly if you need to pay to acquire new customers or you don't have very good retention rates, you need to really watch those margins with everything which you sell. I think their case is just an unsustainable model, particularly when you're up against the Amazons of the world.
Yep. And you know that your shoppers are buying for price. So that's the only kind of like we've got to stand on.
Yep. All right. And our third quickie for the week is The Iconic had a story recently where they have rejigged their marketing budget. Now, this is kind of cool because although they hadn't actually spent more, they still managed to grow their net merchandise value by 5.8%. So spending smarter rather than just pumping more money into the machine. And I thought that was a really, really good sign to see that a retailer like The Iconic, who's traditionally spent a lot of money, are just actually thinking about better allocation of those resources and able to actually grow their sales. And also in the story as well, leading to AI, being more disciplined in terms of like performance and also optimizing different channels. This is a really good one to see.
Yeah, and I liked they were talking about that reallocation of budget towards more experiences and events, which is again something that we've been touching on the last few months. So seems like a really good use of the budget and where everyone's moving in terms of creating those experiences around the brand.
Yeah, and it's not a case of that they're abandoning performance marketing or traditional advertising either. It's just that they're adding new things to it and they're being more efficient with what they do. With every channel you see, you are going to reach some sort of saturation point, particularly if you just keep pumping more and more money into it. And I've had this happen a couple of times in the last few weeks where we've had clients who have wanted to spend more money in a particular channel. But when you look at the numbers, we're already pretty saturated on that. And we're not going to be able to we may be reaching new people, but we're not going to get the incremental growth with that as well. So rather than continue to pump more money into either a Google or a Meta, looking at how else can we reach that customer rather than on a platform where A, we're already saturated and B, they're also being bombarded with lots of different messages as well.
Absolutely. And for a brand like The Iconic, they're so well known at this point, right? They already have that kind of market saturation. Yeah, how can you kind of look to put that in other places and get that retention up rather than awareness?
Yeah, and I think it's more than just about people knowing your brand. They need that desirability and that constant reminder to come back and buy from you as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, and getting into our deep dives. Now, I did say this was going to be fairly marketplace heavy, this episode, and our first one is about Kogan, where Kogan's profitability took a massive hit due to Mighty Ape, which is their New Zealand marketplace. Now, while their local marketplace had performed quite well, Mighty Ape in New Zealand has dragged down their profitability quite substantially. And in Q1, their adjusted EBITDA is 10.1 million, which is at a 6.5% margin, which is significantly down year on year. So, Alex, all these changes, what do you think is driving this, particularly with things like with Marketplace?
Well, I think this story is interesting because we're talking New Zealand, right? And we know that the Australian economy has been struggling more so has New Zealand. To see that Kogan had an increase overall, but it was Mighty Ape that drew them down makes sense. I think that there's so many players in this space. It's highly competitive. You don't have loyal shoppers. You just got shoppers that are really interested in price. That's where we see Amazon and Temu, dare I say, Shein come into play here.
Yeah, and I think it's a good call for this because like when you look at acquiring a marketplace as well, like by definition, they're a fairly low margin business, and also acquiring a company which is not in your home country either. And we've seen this before. We talked about City Chic last week, focusing on Australia and kind of like letting their US business soften a little bit deliberately in order to focus on Australia. I wonder whether we're seeing kind of the same here, where New Zealand is a fairly small market. I think it's only about 5 million people. So it's not a big market by any stretch of the imagination. So how much can you actually put into building and optimizing that, particularly when you've got the likes of Amazon coming in? A small market where Amazon can come in and dominate pretty quickly, it makes it even harder. Whereas, we've got like 6, 7 times the population. So, you've got a lot more population to be able to market to and still have buy from you to maintain the business.
Yeah, it's a great point. I wonder where Kogan's going to start to focus on whether it's going to be, okay, how do we lift Mighty Ape, or how do we get more out of that wider portfolio of brands or businesses that they have?
Yeah, and we're seeing this across the board, like we talked about before. OzSal, MyDeal, all these companies which are owned by have a larger parent company, starting to think, okay, is this actually strategically viable for us to be able to continue to invest and to prop this business up? Especially since we're talking about publicly listed companies.
Mm.
They're publicly listed, which means that at the end of the day, they need to show shareholder value. They need to show that return to shareholders. And you've got a part of the business like Mighty Ape, which is dragging it down. At some point, it doesn't make sense anymore to keep investing into that.
Yeah, and particularly with, like you've said, really low profit margin, they've got to work a hell of a lot harder to kind of turn that around.
Mm. And on the flip side, though, in our second deep dive, Myer have actually seen their marketplace business absolutely boom. So they had a 41% increase in sales and are continuing to expand that channel. The online sales totaled $818.9 million, and marketplace was up 41%. That's just huge numbers for Myer.
100%. I continue to be impressed by Myer. I remember when we were talking about the sites that have the largest traffic in Australia, and Myer came up very, very high. I think from memory above the Iconic, actually. My theory here, Mel, is that department stores were really the original marketplace. So it makes sense for the Myer brand, and that's why they've pulled it off so well.
Oh, I totally agree. I think it just goes to show the strength of having that legacy brand as well. Everyone in Australia knows Myer and David Jones. At least I think most people over a certain age would know them. I have spent many hours of my misspent youth at the Myer Centre in Rundle Mall, amongst many other places. But you've got that brand recognition. You've got trust. You've got that traffic of people who are just aware of that brand. That it gives you a really big moat to be able to build around. As well, which a smaller player like an OzSal doesn't have, because OzSal, although they've been around for a long time, a lot of people still don't know who they are. But everyone in a retail sense knows Myer, knows David Jones.
Yeah, there's that trust. And you can drive to a store and get help if you needed to, which that kind of physical touch, being able to get that accountability rather than sending off an email to a platform that you just don't know whether they've got that credibility.
And Myer are investing quite heavily as well into their online experience too. So in terms of the website, in terms of the inventory management, but also investing into Miracle as well to help rapidly onboard thousands more sellers by mid 2026. So I think this is definitely one to be looking out for, where particularly brands who don't want to be associated with the likes of an Amazon are going to start finding their way here, because one of the big trends we're seeing in the US is the continued growth of marketplaces. For the big department stores there like Saks, Nordstrom, Bloomingdale's, marketplaces are really what's driving their growth now. And people are going there. People are preferencing going there because A, you've got a larger assortment of brands. They're typically running offers kind of all the time. C, you can use your points as well. And D, you've also got generally more favorable fulfillment and return options.
Yeah, absolutely. The partnering with Miracle, I think, is a really smart move. We know that they power the big players, so it's just going to make that plug and play essentially a lot easier for these new brands. And I agree with what you're saying in the sense that Myer is closer aligned for some of these brands rather than being on a discount marketplace.
So I'm very excited to see what happens next year, because the other thing this will then unlock for Myer as well is greater retail media revenue. So retail media has been one of the hot topics probably for the last 12 months. I think at Shop Talk earlier this year, that was like the main topic people were talking about how do you start leveraging more retail media. And I think this is a great play for Myer. Not only do they get that added sales and traffic through from there, but in order for brands to then stand out, well, they're going to need to buy retail media. So Myer then pivots into becoming an advertising business, which
Yeah,
we've
for
talked
sure.
about before with Amazon. That's their fastest growing part of the business.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, how do we kind of pay for those eyeballs? It's going to be interesting to see. I do think the differentiation of the marketplace versus the in-store experience as well, and how you can communicate that to shoppers will be interesting, particularly for those shoppers that don't live and breathe e-commerce like we do, or those listening, right? Is that going to add some friction where you see a product online and think you can still go into the Myer store to find it?
That's a really good question. I think whether you can just like differentiate that so people know what they're buying online. If they're browsing it online, it's clearly labeled that it's not available in store. It's only online. I'm seeing that a little bit now. But yeah, but I think there are things which retailers need to also think about in terms of if they are still going to look to drive D2C. Highly recommend thinking about what do you actually want to make available in marketplaces versus your D2C. Because if you put everything on marketplace, they're all going to buy from there. So make sure you do have some exclusives for your D2C channels.
Yeah, that's a really good take. I'm sure Maya have a similar setup. I was on David Jones over the weekend where you can you can just toggle on the David Jones website, shop marketplace or shop kind of D2C products. So it's that education of this is what's available versus this is the marketplace.
Yeah, so super exciting times. I wonder whether we are going to be following that US model as well, which I got to say, I thought it hit a ceiling, but it's just continuing to grow and grow and grow in terms of marketplace adoption over there.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. And our final story for the week is a story which I found on Inside Retail earlier, which is about CPG innovation and why it's so bad in Australia. Now, what this story was about, and this caught my eye because it's something I'm very passionate about, is the fact that we do not innovate nearly enough. If you go to a country like the United States or even Korea, to see the number of different options you have there in terms of snacks, soft drinks, chocolates, it just does not compare. We just do not compare to that. Like we have a very limited assortment. And what this study actually showed was that we don't really have innovation as much as I believe the word was incrementalization, where we make these subtle changes to products rather than actually coming up with brand new products in brand new categories.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think, yeah, like you said, in America or Korea overseas, they do have that, and it's risky in a sense. But I think maybe in Australia we're just less keen to try new things. At the end of the day, they don't sell, so then there's no incentive for that innovation. I don't know. What's your take?
Well, I think part of that goes back to said before, like it's less risky, and part of the reason why it's where we're less risk taking is because of what drives the majority of CPG purchases in Australia, which is Woolies and Coles. You still have the majority of CPG purchases going through just two major retailers, which means that they control the terms, which means that they're only going to invest in things which are going to be able to give them a return and a margin. There's no incentive for them to be able to differentiate and innovate and try new things as well. So especially with like higher cost bases for manufacturing through like electricity, raw ingredients, labor, all these things are driving up the cost of that, which means that it's riskier for CPG manufacturers as well to experiment with that, particularly when they don't know how to actually get it onto shelves. So what we're seeing as well is that I've worked and have spoken with a number of CPG brands through my retail startup hour, and a lot of them are going to hit that point where it's like, well, how do I get onto the shelves at Woolies and Coles? The thing is, you're going to need to actually find a way outside of that, because once you go into Woolies and Coles, you play by their rules, unless you're a brand which they really, really want. So it makes it really, really tough to do. And you do need to do your own marketing. You can't just rely on going and getting on the shelves there. If you are going to innovate, and I think there definitely is an appetite for innovation, figuring out that go-to-market strategy, which doesn't involve Woolies and Coles, is the key.
Yeah, and it just sounds like the barrier to entry is just so high that, like you said, just find different outlets. Yeah, it's interesting for sure.
Yeah, I think the AOV challenge is also very real for CPG as well, because when you're talking about buying online D2C, you're talking about maybe like a $20 jar of like chili jam, for instance. The shipping on that's $10. And whether you look at that and go, oh, do I really want to pay $30 for it? Probably not. And you can't offer free shipping on a $20 jar of chili jam anyway. Otherwise, you're making a loss. So it's a really tough challenge, which I think D2C brands have in terms of their go-to-market strategy. But it's something which I hope that people continue to do because we do need that innovation. Like I love testing new products. When I go to like any of like the Easter show or the Royal show or anything like that, I love walking through the exhibitions, the halls, and tasting all the new food which people have.
Remember I haven't seen it in years. Woolworths and Coles used to do that where they would have the new products that have come and they would have somebody there from the business, a rep,
Mm.
doing the taste test for that exact reason. And that was a really great marketing play to help this new brand come onto the shelves and sell well. I really don't see that as much anymore at all.
Yeah, I think post-COVID, a lot of that stopped. I know when I go to Costco, Costco still do some sampling, but yes, you're right. There used to be a lot more sampling which went on, but that's one of the avenues which has kind of gone out of favor. And I wonder whether it has actually been post-COVID where we no longer have that. But even things like markets, when you go to the market and someone sets up a stall there, it's something which doesn't necessarily drive a whole lot of sales, but people actually get a chance to taste your product
Yeah.
or partnering with a restaurant and figuring out how can they get your product in front of people as well.
For sure. No, it's interesting. I think part of it to me sounds consumer led as well, where we need to kind of challenge that and start to try and support new things rather than sticking to the status quo.
I agree. I think that's that from a consumer point of view is the best thing which consumers can do is to actually start trialing some different brands. Don't try your Cheesy Mite 2.0 or whatever they ended up calling it, or any other further extension of Wheat Bix for this or Wheat Bix for that. Let's actually try some genuinely brand new products.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's the only way we're going to get further investment into genuine innovation in this category.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, Alex, that is about all we've got time for this week. What is on your dance card as we head into Black Friday? More buying?
More buying, put a fair dent into it last weekend. So hopefully not, but we'll see what further deals hit my inbox. I'm getting more tips as well. I don't need anything. So now it's going to be up to how good the marketing is, really.
Yeah, excellent.
What about you, Mel?
Look, there's only one brand who I'm kind of interested in, which is a brand called Crawling Death. They make streetwear for, look, it's right up my alley. It seems very heavy metal inspired, like everything's like skulls and swords
Yeah.
and death and stuff like that. So it's like, I'm looking forward to, they've just announced that they're having a Black Friday sale starting Wednesday. So that's probably the only one which I'm actively going to be going on to. But aside from that, I'm pretty chill right now, looking at everyone's results, helping everyone just, navigate the next week or so of Black Friday.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, that's all we got time for. In the meantime, keep innovating, keep selling, and keep growing, and we'll be back next week.
See you next week.